Good afternoon. My name is Lee Emmons. I'm the Water Operations Superintendent with the City of Tracy. Today we're here for the Tracy Subbasin 2026 Spring Groundwater Sustainability Planning and Progress Meeting. Welcome everybody to City Hall, and I'm going to turn this over to Atlee to start the presentation.
Thanks so much, Lee. Welcome everyone. Test this clicker out. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Atlee Keller with Stantec. I'll be facilitating today's meeting. We just have a few logistical things to cover. So we are joined in person and online. We have Nicole Hina-Stroza, my colleague, who will be managing any questions online. So if you do have questions online, go ahead and click into the Q&A portion and she'll elevate them. For those of you in the room, we have a Q&A section after each of our speakers present. So we'll ask for questions at that time. We also have a sustainable groundwater management terminology handout, both in person and then online. If you follow that QR code, it will take you to the Tracy Subbasin homepage. On that homepage is an orange button that has the link to the handout. So if there's any words that go over your head today, just go to that. It's a nifty little quick link. Next slide. All right, so for today's agenda, we have a couple speakers. We'll start with the County of San Joaquin to talk about sustainable groundwater management in the Tracy Subbasin. Then we'll hand it over to DWR to present on their role in groundwater management, both in the state and at the subbasin levels. And then we'll hand it to GEI, the technical consultant, to talk about groundwater conditions as well as the periodic evaluation process. And then it'll come back to me to talk about future public engagement. So with that, I will hand it over to Ashley Couch.
All right, good afternoon. It's good to be with you this afternoon. I appreciate your willingness to take time out of your busy schedule to come meet with us and learn more about sustainable groundwater management in the Tracy Subbasin. So first I want to talk about kind of what led to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act of 2014. Over a period of decades in many areas of California, more groundwater was being pumped for consumptive use than was being naturally replenished by natural recharge. And so, the groundwater was being depleted over time in much of California. And this led to a number of deleterious impacts, such as declining groundwater levels, some wells going dry, land subsidence, loss of aquifer storage, for example, and some of that could be permanent loss. Degraded groundwater quality, saltwater intrusion, or seawater intrusion, and also depletion from surface waters such as rivers and creeks, environmental degradation to groundwater dependent ecosystems and the like. And so as a result of these ongoing challenges that we're facing the state, the legislature back in 2014 passed what's known as the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which was signed by Governor Jerry Brown in 2014. What did the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act accomplish? It basically designated subbasins throughout California as, in different categories: low priority, medium priority, high priority, and high priority basins are considered critically overdrafted basins. And so the Tracy Subbasin, which is the focus of tonight's presentation, is a medium priority basin. It is not critically overdrafted. That's good news, and I'll get into that later in the presentation. But that's the first thing that it did. And then it set forth timelines to bring each subbasin into sustainability for critically overdrafted groundwater subbasins, such as the eastern San Joaquin Subbasin that we also have in about the eastern 2/3 or 3/4 of San Joaquin County, northeast of the San Joaquin River. They have until 2040 to attain sustainability, and they need to be demonstrating to the state adequate annual progress toward that goal. And for medium priority subbasins, such as the Tracy Subbasin, we have until 2042 to attain sustainability. And so we also, in medium priority subbasins, need to demonstrate on an annual basis to the state that we are making adequate annual progress towards sustainability. Now, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, first of all, recognizes that groundwater is best managed locally, okay? They recognize that the people who are stakeholders in Tracy Subbasin and other subbasins, they're the ones that are best equipped to address this issue. However, if for some reason local and I'll get to this later in the presentation, groundwater sustainability agencies do not ultimately work toward attaining sustainability, then the state can come in and assume local control. And what can they do? They can curtail pumping. They can start charging groundwater extraction fees. They can meter wells. They can basically force sustainability, kind of with a heavy hammer, right? But they don't want to do that. They want to give us the opportunity locally to attain sustainability. The other thing about the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is it has no impact on surface water rights. Okay, so it's just groundwater. So with that, timelines, right? Let's talk about the Tracy Subbasin, which is the focus of tonight's presentation. In June of 2017, SGMA required the designation of groundwater sustainability agencies. Now, what is it? Or GSAs. Now, what is a GSA? Well, it's a water district, it's a city, or it's a county, okay? Anything that's not a water district and it's not a city is by default county, okay? So the entire subbasin is covered by a groundwater sustainability agency, and those were formed back in 2017. Now, back in 2019, there are 6 GSAs in the Tracy Subbasin signed a memorandum of agreement and basically said, okay, let's work collaboratively to develop a single groundwater sustainability plan rather than doing 6 plans for each GSA. That's not cost effective, right? There's no economy of scale there. So I think, astutely, they decided to band together and form something called the Tracy Subbasin Coordination Committee, consisting of these 6 GSAs. We hired a consultant, GEI, and they prepared our first groundwater sustainability plan. Now, SGMA requires that for medium priority subbasins such as the Tracy Subbasin, that a groundwater sustainability plan had to be prepared and submitted to the state by January of 2022, and so that was done. It was ratified or adopted by the governing bodies or governing boards of each of the 6 GSAs independently, and then the report was finished. The plan was finished in November of 2021, and then between then and January is adopted by the 6 GSAs and then submitted to the state. Since then, SGMA requires that we prepare and submit an annual report each April 1st. We're going to talk about that later in the presentation and this evening. And basically what that is we have to report out on the conditions in the subbasin, how GSP implementation is going, and the like. And so we submit these annual reports. We've been doing that every year. Back in 2024, the Tracy Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Plan, or GSP, was approved by DWR, which is the state agency, Department of Water Resources, that reviews groundwater sustainability plans. They review annual reports. They review also periodic evaluations, which SGMA requires that we provide every 5 years, which is a more detailed description of conditions in the subbasin and how the efforts evaluates the effectiveness of the efforts that we are making towards attaining sustainability in more detail than the annual report does. So when we received that approval, though, there were 7 corrective actions. We'll get to that later in the presentation. I don't want to focus on that now, but there were things that, okay, you're approved, but you need to consider these 7 things going forward. So, okay, so that's important things that we have to focus on going forward. Continuing, we've submitted annual reports every year, including this, by April 1st of 2026. We'll talk about this year's annual report later in the presentation. And right now we're in the process of preparing an informal GSP update. Then that will help inform our periodic evaluation. It's our first 5-year periodic evaluation that we have to submit to DWR by the end of January 2027. And so we're been rolling up our sleeves this last I would say 8 months or so, and making progress toward that goal. And then, like I said before, we have to attain sustainability by 2042. That being said, we can't just do nothing until 2042. We have to demonstrate every year that we're making progress towards sustainability. So is the clicker working?
No.
No? Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this shows the boundary of the Tracy groundwater subbasin. So it's basically includes the portion of San Joaquin County that's south and west of the San Joaquin River, and a small portion of Alameda County. It's also kind of bounded by the San Joaquin County line, and includes a significant portion of the legally defined delta. The cyan or light blue area in the north is the delta management area. And then the pink area to the south is the non-delta management area. And in our groundwater sustainability plan, those areas are handled very differently. Out in the delta, they're dewatering so that they can farm out there, and in many cases below sea level. And if they were to stop dewatering, their land would flood, they couldn't farm. So that's a different problem. They're not contributing to groundwater overdraft. And so the southern portion of the basin largely relies on surface water, which is a good thing. But we use some groundwater in the southern portion of the basin, and we just need to make sure that we're using that in a sustainable way. So anyway, next slide. All right, so I alluded to this earlier. The Tracy Subbasin consists of, we have 6 GSAs in the Tracy Subbasin, and they each have a membership, a primary point of contact on this Tracy Subbasin GSP Coordination Committee that I mentioned earlier. These 6 GSAs are Manta Carbona Irrigation District. If you'll raise your hand when this is Dave Weisenberg, and just I think it's good just to say your name, who you are. As I go down the list, I think it's good to put a name to a face. Byron Bethany Irrigation District.
Ed Patterson, General Manager, and then Brad Mizuno, our Water Resources.
Thank you very much. City of Lathrop.
Greg Gibson, a Senior Civil Engineer in our Public Works Department.
Okay, thank you. City of Tracy.
Lee Emmons, Water Operations Superintendent.
Thank you. San Joaquin County.
Venki Narasimhalu.
Okay. Actually, Venki's our primary point of contact, Senior Water Resources Engineer. He works with me. I'm the Water Resources Manager for San Joaquin County. And Stewart Tract, do we have anybody here from Stewart Tract? Doesn't look like it. Okay, anyway, that's west of Lathrop, as I understand it.
It's the RD 26.
RD 26.
Regulation District.
Okay.
RD, and it's basically the River House.
River Islands, okay, thank you. So we are working together collaboratively to implement the Tracy Subbasin groundwater sustainability plan. All right, next slide.
Just a tiny bit of a lag, so.
That's okay. I'm not seeing the whole slide, is it?
It's the way this TV is formatted, unfortunately.
Nothing that can be done?
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
at home, they could see it fully, it's just in the room.
Okay, thank you. All right, no worries, thank you. So I mentioned this earlier, I don't really need to get back into it, but 2019, we signed this MOA and decided to work collaboratively. So, you know, we do the GSP preparation and implementation, preparation of annual reports, and preparation submittal of 5-year periodic evaluations. We meet monthly from January to June each year. Usually we'll meet quarterly in the second half of the year, but not this year. We've got too much going on with the preparation of the periodic evaluation. So consequently, we're meeting bi-monthly in the second half of 2026 until we complete this exercise. So right now we're looking to meet, I believe it's the third week, is it 20th of
August 20th.
August 20th is our next meeting. 3 o'clock. I remember 3 o'clock. Okay. So anyway, we post these meetings on the website. It's tracysubbasin.org, and these meetings are open to the public. We welcome and encourage public participation. We want to hear from you. You know, you are the stakeholders. You are the ones that live and work in this area. You are the ones that might suffer consequences. You know, maybe you have a residential well and groundwater is not sustainably managed in the subbasin and it goes dry. That would be a problem for you, right? So, so those are the kinds of things that we're trying to avoid by proactively managing the groundwater withdrawals from the subbasin in a sustainable manner to make sure that we don't have those deleterious effects that I mentioned earlier that resulted in the passing of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in the first place. So all the meetings are open to the public, and we hold these meetings on Zoom virtually. So we welcome you to attend and encourage public participation. We love to hear from you. All right, next slide. That concludes my presentation. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ashley. And next up, we'll have Chelsea Spear with DWR.
Thanks for inviting us. So my name's Chelsea Spear. I'm a senior water resource engineer at DWR and the region coordinator. And then Caitlin's here. She's a geologist and she is our point of contact for the basin. So every sub-basin that's under Sigma's jurisdiction has a DWR employee that's assigned to the basin where they attend meetings, they provide updates on assistance programs we have, new data that comes out, and help to answer any questions or track down the right people to answer questions as they come up. So my role is kind of, I'm a POC for 2 basins, similar to how Caitlin is here. And then I also, for our quarter of the state that our region office is, I track what's going on in all the basins and coordinate between other DWR programs in our headquarters. So I just wanted to do a quick overview when I start on the roles and responsibilities for Sigma, because it does have a very complicated governance structure. Like Ashley said, from the very outset, Sigma is really set up to be local control managed by locals who know their system best. And even within that local level, the governance structure can be complicated. We have subbasins, so we have the Tracy Subbasin here that has to come up with a single plan or multiple coordinated plans in some cases on how they're going to reach sustainability. But within that subbasin, you have 6 different GSAs. And once the plan is approved or submitted, each of those GSAs have their roles and responsibilities, like their own fee-making authority, and they have, I assume here you guys haven't done any like metering or demand management, or because we're in a lot better condition, like Ashley was saying. But if it was like the case where you needed that, that would be at the GSA level rather than the subbasin level. But the subbasin is evaluated on a whole if they're sustainable or not, even though there's these different local managing entities. So that's kind of like a weird piece. And then we also have 2 state agencies with oversight role. So Caitlin and I are with Department of Water Resources. So we're like your first contact. We have a big part of our role is assistance, which I'll get to on the next slide. But we also have the role of reviewing all the planning documents that the GSAs put together and submit. And then we have to determine, does it look like you're on track to be sustainable? If not, then the basin could get sent to the state board, and they're really the ones that are like considered the backstop. They would be the ones to enforce curtailment if it came to that. But even if it comes to that worst case scenario, still the goal is to have the locals manage the basin. So as soon as possible, once the basin is willing and able to revise their plan to something that the state finds is likely to achieve sustainability, it would go back to that local control. So it's not, the state board doesn't want to be in long-term control of any of the basins. And because it's set up for a short-term control, the only mechanism that they use between demand management and supply is the demand management. So like you heard in some of the southern San Joaquin basins, they do the curtailments. They're not going to be doing these like long-term like water supply projects. That would be after it gets returned to the locals. And then on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about DWR's assistance role, which is more the fun part, which I get to be involved in a little bit more. So we have administered a lot of grants. I would say over the last 5 years, there's been more than $500 million of both planning and on the ground construction grants. For Sigma specific, we have technical assistance programs. Oh, before I move on from grants, so the latest grant program in 2024, the voters passed Proposition 4, which was for pretty broad. It was a $10 billion bond for climate resilience, but a piece of that will go to Sigma. So that's still working through the whole process, but in 2027, that cycle will open for like grant applications. And there's a few, I think $320 million dedicated to Sigma projects. And then we have tons of data collection that the state does. So we help look at groundwater levels, subsidence, lots of monitoring. If you guys are interested in looking at the data, we have a website called California's Groundwater Live. If you just Google that, it's very user-friendly. You don't have to be like a super data technical specialist, but it shows like where you're getting dry wells, how many wells have been installed, like what's the general trend of your groundwater levels in your area. Are they going up or down? So I think that's a really user-friendly site for the layperson. And then we have technical support services we've done hundreds of like monitoring wells throughout the state to help the GSAs understand their groundwater conditions. And then we also have facilitation support services. I'm not, is yours under that? Atlee might be under that, or are you separate? Okay. So Stantec does help with that, but they can help with like doing outreach meetings like this, public meetings, a lot of different things.
This meeting is under.
Oh, it is under, okay.
Good numbers.
So sometimes the GSAs will hire the same group under their own thing, and then on the last slide, we also do guidance documents. So our two recent guidance documents, we just published a best management practice document on land subsidence. I brought a couple hard copies back here and some like Sigma basics brochures if you're interested in checking that out. And then we're hopefully soon going to be publishing an interconnected surface water guidance document. We've already published 3 technical papers on how to determine if you have surface water depletion or not. And then this final guidance document will help advise on how you determine what is or isn't sustainable and setting those like metrics of when have we reached a threshold that's gonna cause undesirable results. So that's all I had for today, unless there is question. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Chelsea. And next up, we have Mike.
So my name is Mike Cornelius. I work with GEI Consultants, and we're the technical consultant for the Tracy Subbasin GSA. And so, the next slide. So initially, we're going to talk about the Water Year 2025 annual report. So I think this will answer some of your questions. David, you brought up some of the things in the maps and things to take a look at. So the intent of the annual reports, as Ashley mentioned, was that we're taking a look every year at how are things changing on an annual basis, because we have different hydrology, demands may change, the state of the basin may change a little bit, and how are we doing on our progress towards achieving sustainability by 2042. And so these are reports that are required by the department to be submitted by April 1st of every year. And then we prepare those, and then they get posted online, so all this information is out there. And one of the things to note on the map here, and Ashley, you mentioned a little bit, is we have the subbasin is bifurcated into 2 areas. We have the delta area in the north and the non-delta area in the south. And because the delta area mostly includes the delta islands, and those are irrigated with surface water, partly because of their access to surface water, and 2, because the groundwater is very poor for agriculture. One of the things that we proposed to the department was to develop these 2 management areas and really focus on the non-delta area, not the delta area, because there's really no groundwater to manage there. So if we go to the next slide. So if we take a look at the variability, the hydrologic variability over time, you can see like over the last 75 years that the average rainfall in the basin at the Tracy Carbona gauge is about 10 inches. And then last year in Water Year 2025, we had about 6 inches of rain. So we're well below normal. And so you can see each one of those bars represents whether we're above or below that average rainfall for the year. And you can see we have some very wet years. I think that highest spike there is about 1983. And then 1997 is pretty high as well. And then you can see we do get those dry periods. And so part of the role of the GSP and of all of this monitoring is to be tracking how are we performing year after year as we go through these variable conditions. And if we go to the next slide, not only does it vary on a year-by-year basis, but you can see it also changes significantly on a month-to-month basis. So when the storms are coming through, for example, on those blue bars, on the orange bars, you can see that's that monthly trend, long-term trend. Clearly, we get our rain in the winter, peaking in the December, January, February period. Well, that doesn't mean you're going to get rain every month, just because that's how it's performed historically. For example, if you take a look at January, you see we got almost no rain in January. We average a little over 2 inches, and we got maybe 1/10 of an inch or so. So that variability, both the annual and monthly, is why we need to have a plan in place to be able to respond to all of those different changing conditions. Next slide. So, Ashley had mentioned it, and it's probably worth reinforcing. The Tracy Subbasin is in very good shape. We have to comply with SGMA because of other factors that got us into the pot to have to be in SGMA. And I think there's 150-ish groundwater subbasins that have to comply with SGMA out of 450 or so in the state. So not every basin has to comply, but the ones that meet certain criteria did. So a couple things to think about as we go through this. One, the basin gets 95% of its water from surface water. And so we are relatively a low groundwater pumper compared to the overall demand in the basin. And the other thing to keep in mind with that is that we have very senior water rights in the basin. So we have very high reliability of our surface water supply. And you can see on that table there, the difference between the net groundwater pumping on the order of 7,000 acre feet in last year compared to 170,000 acre feet of surface water. And so the last point I'd want to make on this slide is, in addition to having good access to surface water, the basin has been very proactive in managing that and using that in the past. For example, the city of Tracy brought in surface water from South San Joaquin Irrigation District probably 15 years ago or so. So ahead of SGMA, some basins are very proactively planning what their future looks like. And so that's a good something else to keep in mind as we go. Next slide.
There's a reason why it's surface water and not groundwater.
Absolutely. Well, and the groundwater quality in the basin is not conducive to a lot of the crops in the basin. So there's reasons why, yes. So if you go back a slide, you'll see that a lot of that groundwater pumping is for the urban purveyors. And so the other thing to think about that we're going to get into in the next couple slides is that there's two aquifers in the non-delta area. There's the upper aquifer, which is closest to the ground surface. And then there's a large regional confining layer called the Corcoran clay, which is down about 200 feet or so. And the aquifer below that is under pressure, and that's called a confined aquifer. Typically, municipalities go to the confined aquifers or deeper aquifers because there's better quality water there for them. And so we'll see as we go through some of the graphs, some of the differences between those things. So next slide.
Can I ask a quick question on
Absolutely.
that slide?
Yes.
The city of Tracy, I'm just curious. I see it says the surface water 21. Is that from the water from South San Joaquin?
That's water from South San Joaquin and the Delta Mendota.
Oh, and the other thing I didn't mention on the surface water side is, in addition to the water rights, they have CBP contracts. So we do have water from the federal projects as well as water rights water that has very senior water rights.
That's pretty smart of Tracy. Getting in that project early on.
1977.
Oh, yeah. Ripping second eggs on that right now.
Oh, they are. We can move on from that.
So
I was anyway, yeah, you and I could talk about, give you a story about that one. I could give you a good story on that one.
So Chelsea had mentioned, as far as wells that we monitor, like our official wells to monitor in the basin, that those levels get posted on the DWR website. So this map shows the location of the wells in the upper aquifer, so probably that top 200 feet or so. And that's above that clay layer. And so all those little yellow circles are the locations of those wells. And one thing to note, again, for the Tracy Subbasin, as over the last 5 years, they've been very proactive in getting funding to install dedicated monitoring wells, which is a huge deal when you're trying to understand the basin. Caitlin, I think you mentioned something about pumping wells and things like that. By having a dedicated monitoring well network, you avoid the challenges of using production wells to do your monitoring. So the basin has been very effective at adding wells. And a lot of those wells and the new wells are very targeted to collect data at very specific locations. Some of them are to fill data gaps. Some of them are to be near rivers and streams to understand that surface water, groundwater interaction. Some of them are, and a lot of these are multi-completion wells, both the upper aquifer and the lower aquifer, so we can see how water is moving between those two aquifers. And, you know, like the upper aquifer is important for shallow domestic wells and some agricultural wells, and I won't bemoan that point. And then surface water groundwater interaction. The deep wells are important because we want to be tracking the levels at depth, because that's where land subsidence could occur or compaction could occur, which would cause land subsidence. So you can see the location of the wells here on the upper aquifer. And if we go to the next slide, you can see a tannish kind of arc going across the top of the figure there. And that is the approximate extent of the Corcoran clay. And that's that large regional confining layer I was telling you about. And so all of these wells on this map are below that clay layer. And you can see a lot of those, where those symbols are, there's like multiple, there's a MW1A, 1B, 1C. And so those are monitoring levels in different aquifers that are all beneath that large clay layer. So there might be different gravel layers that they're monitoring there. And one thing to point, David had mentioned that on the south part of the basin, we have that interfingering with the Delta Mendota Basin. And so you can kind of see that historically the subbasin boundary was along the county line there, the San Joaquin County, Stanislaus County line. But then it was adjusted to, I think, probably for irrigation district boundaries to simplify their management of it. It may simplify their management of it, but it makes our life a lot more complicated, because then we are tracking flows going out of our subbasin into the other one, back in and back out. And so this area is a little bit challenging for us to really get a good, strong handle on. And you'll see that on some of the maps as we go through. Next slide. Oh,
We are working with Delta Mendota in coordination with those two. So you guys have reached out. I know Richard has reached out.
Yeah, and that's a real important point. And so one of the things, when we get to the corrective actions and things like that, I think one of the things that the department really wanted to emphasize through Sigma is, especially like in the Central Valley where you have all of these subbasins, you kind of got to work with your neighbors, because just because there's a river there doesn't mean groundwater stops flowing. So it's moving back and forth beneath there. So what we may do may impact our neighboring basin, and what they may do may impact us. So that coordination, like Lee was mentioned, is real important to make sure that we're all talking the same. So in Water Year 2025, this is a groundwater level change map. And this is for that upper aquifer, that portion above that Corcoran clay. And you can see that on the scale to the left there we go from differences of 8 feet to 4 feet, 4 feet to 0 feet, so very little change in groundwater elevation, or an increase of up to 4 feet in some areas. So you can kind of see, what does that look like for this year in the area? One thing to keep in mind is that there are a lot more wells that are used to draw those contours and to develop those maps than just the few that you see on the screen. And so there's a lot more data that goes behind it. We just have our representative monitoring sites are the ones that we report to the department. If we go to, and also you can see at the top there, we had a minus 5,000 acre feet change in storage. So again, going back to, it was a dry year, we had about half our precipitation, probably pumped more, we had less groundwater recharge. So those things contribute to a decline in groundwater storage. Next slide.
One thing that needs to be pointed out, I mentioned it to Richard over the years, there's drainage lines crisscrossing this entire region. None of it's accounted for.
Yeah.
They're historic, they're traditional. Who knows how much water is draining out of this basin just due to passive tile drains.
So that's a great point, Ed. And if we take a look at the most recent water budget chapter that we have, one of the things that we included in this chapter is a location of where do all those drains exist as represented in the groundwater model, which we use C2VSIM, which is the department's groundwater model for the entire Central Valley. So one thing, so the Central Valley covers about 20,000 square miles. So this is an enormous model. And our Tracy Subbasin portion is just a teeny tiny spot of it. And so one of the things that we've done, and we're using the state's model to do our water budgets and our analysis, is that we've been working with the state, with their modelers to say, hey, we want to make sure that you have the right data, that we're being represented appropriately. So we've been coordinating with their modelers over time to try to sort through that to make sure, we have all the right surface water supplies in the model. Because if we don't, the model is going to say, well, you don't have enough surface water, we're going to pump more groundwater. And then you get this enormous groundwater pumping, which we know is fictitious. So that's one of those things, going back to the slide regarding that coordination between local agencies and the department and the state board. We want to make sure that we're coordinating with the department, especially when we're using their model to help us do our analysis.
What year are these slides?
This is water year 2025. So,
And a water year is what month? to what month?
water year is October 1st to September 30th every year.
So when you say 2025, is that the ending month? or
It
the
is
beginning month?
October 1, 2024 to September 30, 2025. Yes, I always have to do that.
This year looks pretty good. So right now, the current year.
Yeah. So this slide is interesting because you can see there's more red on the map, and red's usually not good. And so you can see that between 2024, water year 2024 and 2025, we had a large area of declining groundwater elevations. And even though the Tracy Subbasin does not pump a lot of groundwater, we did have much less recharge because of the drier year. And also there's pumping that's going on south of us in the Delta Mendota Basin that may be impacting this. And so those are some of the things, that we're continuing to coordinate with them to make sure that what we're seeing in our monitoring wells are the same geologic units that are represented on their wells. And so there's lots of coordination that needs to take place when we're doing these water level maps.
And that's, for instance, those white fingers.
Yes, those white
Because
fingers.
they may have had low water allocations.
Yep.
Because in that red area, that's mostly Bannock-Carbona Irrigation District, and we didn't do any groundwater pumping.
Yep. So
why is it depleted?
right, and that's dry conditions and surrounding conditions may contribute to that. And if the other thing, David, I think to point out, if we go to the next slide, something that's interesting is that if we take a look at the cumulative change in storage, these are fall elevations since 2016. You can see those spikes and drop-offs in those in the figures. And the upper aquifer, let me make sure I got this right, is the is the blue? Okay, thank you. And so you can see how the levels have changed in there over time. And you can see that huge spike in water year 2023. And so that was one of the wettest years on record throughout the state. And so a lot of groundwater levels shot up that year throughout the state, which was a great year for groundwater recharge. And so then the orange you can see on the confined aquifer, you can see a spike up in 2017, again, another very wet year. And then right in the middle of the graph, you see a drop in 2021. And so those color bands kind of give you a sense of the water year type. So 2021 and 2022 were critically dry years. And so again, dry years, less recharge, more groundwater pumping, groundwater levels come down. In 2023, again, we spiked up because of that wetness. So when we see a decline in a map in 1 year, we have to think about what is the condition, but also what was the condition the year before. So David, while levels may have dropped, they may look more grim on that large red area. it's because levels were probably higher the year before. And then we're kind of coming back down to more of that common level. So
that, those previous graphs were just a year to year.
it's just 1 year.
comparison.
Yeah, just a 1 year,
Not a-
1 year. Right. Right.
And these graphs here are just for the Tracy Subbasin?
These are Tracy Subbasin, yes. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So there's different things we have to think about when we're looking at data like this to make sure we're trying to understand it. And one of the things, as we have more monitoring wells and more dedicated monitoring wells, our grid essentially of data points gets better and better. So it allows us to refine and make better groundwater level maps and better groundwater level difference maps. And one thing to keep in mind on that is, in order to have a difference map, you need to have observation in that same well in both years. And so with production wells, you don't always get that. And so your data can be a little bit, have gaps and holes in it. With dedicated monitoring wells, you're much more likely to have more consistent data on a regular basis. Next slide.
Or a mouse as you hold up. There it goes.
So we talked a little bit about groundwater levels and groundwater storage. Overall, the basin again is very healthy. Levels and storage are doing well. And in water year 2025, for our other sustainable management criteria, water quality, subsidence, and surface water depletion, we didn't have any exceedances there. So the basin continues to be healthy. So we're very happy about that. I don't think there's too much more to say on that one. So, we've talked about filling data gaps, both in the past, present, and in the future. And so, we talked about DWR providing a lot of funding for the Tracy Subbasin to continue to install more monitoring wells, which again is very, very helpful and makes all of our lives a little bit easier. We go to shallow wells, and sometimes we go to deep wells, depending on where is the target, where's the data gap that we need to fill. And again, I think we probably already installed at least one of those 2 monitoring wells that are going to be installed this year, but we're continuing to actively pursue more monitoring. And Richard, who is not here today, he's out off in the wilderness somewhere. I always tease him because in my mind, he imagines the grains of sand being deposited when he's looking like through a driller's log or when he's looking at a soil sample. And he just totally visualizes all this stuff. And so the more data we can get him to plug into that mind of his, the better off we'll be. So, next slide. In addition to annual reports talking about what are the conditions that we have, it also wants to know about what are the projects and management actions you're undertaking to try to achieve sustainability. And so projects typically are actual projects, projects to bring water in, to reduce groundwater pumping, things like that. And management actions can be something like, well, we need to develop a new well ordinance to keep wells away from a creek or a river or some other feature. So a lot of our problems.
I have no way.
Those are kind of hard to see.
Some of our projects and management actions focus on, prioritizing the use of surface water. And we'll talk about one of those projects here in a minute. ASR wells, aquifer storage and recovery wells, which the city has a handful of those wells that we bring in surface water from some other location, inject it into the ground for future use. So we're creating a bubble underground to improve groundwater levels for future use. And then groundwater recharge, and like I said, management actions might include like well standards for a basin. And if we go to the next slide, I think this is
Well, being a farmer, I know there's 2 things you gotta have in order to grow a crop, and that's the sun and water.
The 2 essentials, sun and water. For generations in this stretch of land, one of them came from underground. Now, for the first time, surface water will flow here, delivered through a newly completed pipeline, designed to reduce reliance on groundwater.
It opens doors for that whole area now that previously didn't have any surface water.
It helps me for sustainability. keep my groundwater recharge up and have two sources of water. I have surface water, and then also I have my pumps for groundwater.
That's the idea behind conjunctive use. Using surface water when it's available and preserving groundwater for dry years. After more than a year of construction, Phase 2 of the Banta Carbona Irrigation District's conjunctive use project is complete, with an upgraded pump station and 3 miles of new pipeline. In 2026, surface water, primarily from the San Joaquin River, will flow to nearly 1,600 acres of farmland that have never been able to receive it before.
It's really important and it's really exciting for a lot of reasons. This project doesn't just benefit the district, it also benefits the farmers that are receiving surface water, which is generally of higher quality than what they are pumping out of the ground, and will help them to produce better crop. It benefits the small disadvantaged community we have over here, the San Joaquin River Club, in helping to keep the aquifer replenished so that there is water for them to pump out. It benefits the entire region and the subbasin as a whole.
This $10 million grant-funded project, built in partnership with the state, reflects years of planning and shared commitment. Now, the system is complete, ready to deliver. It's a proactive response to California's weather extremes, and part of how Banta Carbona is implementing the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. More than moving water, this project builds security for the seasons ahead, safeguarding the groundwater basin beneath this land. As surface water begins flowing, it marks more than the end of construction. It strengthens the Tracy Subbasin. And for the families who work this land, it provides something even greater: confidence they can keep farming it for generations to come.
This was a big project. I got to see it every day. It says a lot that they had the ability to get it done. It's not something that they had to do, but it's definitely going to improve our area. We're grateful for it.
The district has always kept sustainability at the forefront of its vision, and so it's great to know that this project is not just providing sustainability for now, but also for the future.
For a district to step out and to put their foot forward to helping farmers is that's amazing. This project will help my family in the future, a foundation for them to continue farming, to stay in agriculture.
A new logo, David?
So that was an example of a project that has been implemented. And then one of the things we do in the annual report is also take a look at new projects and management actions that we need to consider. And so here's a list of some of the supplemental projects and management actions we identified. And they're referred to as supplemental because, like Ashley had mentioned, we're on the verge of sustainability. And so we are not as, for lack of a better word, desperate as other basins to develop big projects to bring in large quantities of water to offset their groundwater pumping. We have a little bit more of an adaptive management opportunity where we only need small bits of water to try to continue to make things better. And so we've identified a handful of projects here to be considered. And David, it looks like everyone wants to use your surface water.
That's
so
Richard.
That's Richard, yeah, that sounds right. And you can see there's a handful of different projects continuing to build on that infrastructure that we have to leverage the available water that we do have when it's available. And in addition, we have a project for the city of Tracy to convert some of their production wells to ASR wells, again, to enhance recharge opportunities. So with that, I think I am done with this part of the presentation.
I'd like to add, though, we could not have done this project without DWR and that grant. So that was critical. Otherwise, Mr. Charisma here wouldn't have been able to get water, et cetera. So we really appreciate DWR.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, not mine.
Okay, so now we're going to move from the annual reports, right? We do this every year, report to meet our SGMA obligations to report to the department. And now we're going to move to the periodic evaluation. And I kind of refer to this as the 2027 periodic evaluation. And the reason for that is we don't know what's going to happen in 2032 or 2037 on our way to 2042. Ashley had mentioned that the department had approved the GSP in 2024, but they included 7 recommended corrective actions. And As far as I've seen, all of the different approved GSPs had some corrective actions with them. And some of them are like kind of basin specific, and some of them are more, let's just improve the body of knowledge about that basin. So we'll kind of go through those. The periodic evaluation is due in 2027. And we determined that we could do a periodic evaluation because we did not have any large changes or any surprises that we encountered in the last 5 years of managing the basin. So at this point in time, we're looking out into the future at 2032. We're thinking maybe that'll be the time to do an amendment, which is a little bit bigger lift than it is right now. But again, the basin at about 1,000 acre feet of overdraft a year, we think that's something that we're pretty comfortable with at this point in time. Go to the next slide. So these are the 7 corrective actions that were specific to the Tracy Subbasin. And I'm just going to go through them very quickly here. Revising the current water budget, something that I think we always need to do as we collect more data. The second one, the management areas, that's where the department was asking us, give us some more information about that Delta management area. Why do we not need to be managing groundwater there? So we're adding more content for that. And then the other ones, if you take a look at those are really a lot about the sustainable management criteria. Groundwater levels, groundwater quality, land subsidence, stream depletions, and then additional monitoring network. And so from the GSPs or the letters of determination I've looked at, a lot of those are pretty common in a lot of the different subbasins. Again, it's to improve the knowledge of the basin so you can continue to improve your management there. And the underpinning one there, that additional monitoring, that's pretty key to what we're trying to do. If we're trying to manage this thing, we got to understand what's going on there. Next slide. So here are some of the highlights of what's going to be in the periodic evaluation. Talking about the sustainable management criteria, how are we progressing towards those? Again, projects and management actions, we just talked about those. Updating the basin setting, did we collect more data in the last 5 years that has changed our understanding of the basin? Do we have a different hydrogeologic conceptual model now than we did 5 years ago? And I don't think we really do in this basin, although we do have more refined knowledge because of all the additional monitoring wells we've installed. Asking about the monitoring networks, the GSA authorities and enforcement actions. We are not a basin in strife, so we don't quite have the same energy that other basins might for trying to achieve sustainability, and then our outreach and engagement opportunities. Next slide. And then here's kind of the process that we went through. So one of the things, Ashley, I think you may have mentioned it, we did what we called a GSP update. And that is not a formal requirement of the department, but one of the things we wanted to do was document in the GSP the changes that have taken place in the last 5 years. So we have a red line strikeout version of our 2022 GSP with those changes in it. So we can document where we are in 2027. And when we get to 2032, we don't have to go all the way back to 2022. We can start here because a lot's taken place since then. So we're doing the periodic evaluation. The GSAs are going to review it. We're going to finalize it and then submit it to the department by our January deadline. Next slide. And that was it. Any questions?
None on
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Good night.
All right, we're on our last portion. Go to the next slide. So this is just your call to action to continue to share the interested parties database listserv to your neighbors, your friends. That's how you find out about these meetings and other events and information that's being shared online. You can scan that QR code, or it's on the homepage at the tracysubbasin.org. Next slide. And then, as always, contact your GSA rep if that's your first line of communication if you have a question. If you do not know who your GSA representative is or what GSA you are a part of, you can scan that QR code to get to DWR's map viewer and identify. You type in your address and it'll bring up which GSA you're in.
Or just email us.
Yes, that too. And that's all that we have tonight. Thank you everyone for your participation and for showing up. Thanks to those online. And have a great rest of your evening.